Ruth, chapter 1, verse 2 says, "And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi, and the name of his two sons Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there." Hi, I'm Victoria, and my verse by verse Aroma approach to Bible study showed me so many new things in Ruth 1, verse 2. I'm so glad you're here. If you stay to the end of today's Bible study, you will learn the answer to questions like, was Elimelech wrong to go to Moab? Are there any other women named Naomi in the Bible? What is Paleo-Hebrew and why is it important? Why are Elimelech's family called Ephrathites? A bonus question for you Bible trivia fans that you will get answered. Who is Tubal-Cain? And how is his sister's name related to the book of Ruth? Welcome to the Aroma Mom Ruth Bible study. Keep watching for the answer to these questions and much more. Today's lesson, Identity in Ancient Israel. As you go through today's Bible study, make a note of the new things you discover. You will be shocked at how much you will learn in just one verse. I divided Ruth 1, verse 2 into 4 identities using my systematic approach to Bible verse mapping that I call the arranged step of the Aroma approach to Bible study. In Division 1 of verse 1, we will discuss the identity of the man. In Division 2, we will look at the identity of his wife. In Division 3, we will discuss the identity of his sons and his home country and home people. In Division 4, we will investigate the place identity of the family's destination. After arranging the verse, I go through and I look for keywords. So I noted the keywords in this verse for deeper study, and they are Elimelech, Naomi, Ephrathites, and continued there. As a quick reminder from our last video, we are given specific names here in the book of Ruth. Why? As we talked about, God, through the author, wants us to know that this is a historical account of real people. So this emphasizes my point about the reliability of the Bible and therefore the reliability of the book of Ruth. They are real people with real identities that matter to God and the others in their lives, and we can learn something from them too. And the name of the man was Elimelech. This is the only time in our narrative when Elimelech is our main focus. We learned about his identity as a patriarch of his family in my Ruth chapter 1 verse 1 video. Please go back and watch that when you have a chance. Let me share what I learned about Elimelech's identity from the meaning of his name in Hebrew. The name Elimelech is a combination of 2 Hebrew words. One word means God, that's El, and the other means king, and that's Melech. This is usually translated as God is my king or God is the king. That was Elimelech's identity because no matter what happened to him or his family, God was in control. God was king of his life through triumphs and trials. What a good reminder for us as we begin our study of the book of Ruth. The events in this book remind us that God is king of the world and king of our lives. He sits on his throne and not even a sparrow escapes his loving care and guidance. We will see God the King, God our King, God my King, working all things together for good throughout the book of Ruth. An area of interest for me is archaeology, and this includes the archaeology of language. And so I really enjoy studying Paleo-Hebrew. Let me explain to you first what is Paleo-Hebrew. It is a pictorial language, a hieroglyphic language, or pictographic, in which pictures were used instead of letters, like the ancient Egyptian language, for instance. It is the most ancient Hebrew written language and dates to the 10th century BC. Before the Babylonian exile, Old Testament authors wrote in only Paleo-Hebrew. Now, why is Paleo-Hebrew important? A few reasons. One, it unlocks for us ancient biblical artifacts because these are often inscribed in Paleo-Hebrew, especially the very oldest artifacts that we find in archaeology. Paleo-Hebrew helps us understand the meanings of important biblical words because we can understand the meanings of the pictures. Also, Paleo-Hebrew usually confirms what we know about ancient Hebrew culture in the Bible. For instance, the idea of a staff for comfort and protection. Now, let's take a look at the Paleo-Hebrew for Elimelech. We still have the two words coming together to form Elimelech, king and God. I'm going to choose the shorter word here, which is God. Just look briefly at the Paleo-Hebrew. Now, the two letters that make up the word, really it is a title or a name, El, are Aleph and Lamed. Aleph being the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and Lamed being in the middle. Aleph was the picture for an ox head, and Lamed was the picture for a staff, the kind used by shepherds. The ox symbolized strength, and the staff symbolized leadership and authority, so it is easy to see how these letters came together to mean God is my king or the king. Well, that was my TED Talk on Paleo-Hebrew, and now you know a little something about Paleo-Hebrew. Back to Elimelech. We read that he left Israel to go to Moab. Was he wrong to do that, as I learned that some Bible study authors say? It comes down to identity. Did Elimelech live up to his name? What was his true identity? Was he an obedient servant to God, his king, or was he a rebel against his king? Now, these questions did not come to mind as I first read Ruth 1 for a Bible study that I was in. So, when the Bible study author stated that Elimelech was wrong to leave the famine in Israel and go to Moab, I was surprised. When I reread the passage, I didn't notice anything said or implied about Elimelech being wrong. After studying this passage in detail, I agree with the pulpit commentary that says, it is enough to say in reply to the question that there is no hint in the text itself that the step taken of going to Moab was blamable or blamed. So the answer is we don't know if Elimelech was wrong because the biblical text doesn't say. Those who say that Elimelech was wrong are making assumptions about things that are not specifically revealed in the text about Elimelech and about his motives. We will come back to this topic in a later Book of Ruth Bible study video. For now, for my purposes in this study, I will be studying the big picture and the big themes in the Book of Ruth, so we don't get too caught up in smaller issues. We don't want to miss the big picture in this beautiful book. Aroma application for Division 1. Number 1, find 3 Bible verses that refer to God as King. Write them down in your journal or in one of the Aroma Mom Bible study worksheets that you will find linked in the description. Number 2, ask God to reveal what He wants you to learn as you read or study your Bible, specifically right now in the Book of Ruth. Number 3, look up at least 3 names of Jesus and write the Bible verses where you find those so you can refer to them later. And it's a bonus if you include at least one from the Old Testament. Write that in your journal or again in the Aroma Mom Bible study worksheet. On to Division 2, and the name of his wife, Naomi. The woman referred to as wife in our previous study verse, Ruth chapter 1, verse 1, gets a name and the beginning of another more specific identity here. The name Naomi is thought to be derived from the Hebrew verb for pleasant, sweet, delightful, or beautiful, and that's according to the Abram Publications Biblical Dictionary. Now, the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew Lexicon, which is considered the most comprehensive source of Hebrew word meanings, says that Naomi means kindness, pleasantness, or sweetness. However, there are some other scholars who believe a part of her name may mean God. So some sources, like the pulpit commentary, believe the name to mean God is sweet. Now, I believe this goes together very well with another verse in Ruth we're going to get to soon when Naomi talks about her name. So this goes together very well with the meaning of God is sweet when she discusses her name change because of her identity change related to her change in circumstances. So stay tuned to a future video for that. Now, the name Naomi is only found in the Bible in the book of Ruth. There are no other women named Naomi in the Bible. However, I learned an interesting fact that I never knew. There is a closely related name derived from the same Hebrew root as Naomi, which is the name Nama. Nama is found 3 times in the Bible. The first mention is in Genesis chapter 4, verse 22. And this is where you will learn about Tubal-Cain and his sister. This Nama was the sister of Tubal-Cain. Who was Tubal-Cain? He was a descendant of Cain and the world's first metal worker. I bet you never learned about this woman of the Bible. I know I never had. We learned about this connection in Genesis 4:22, and the verse goes like this: Then Zillah also gave birth to Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools of bronze and iron, and the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. Genesis 4:22. Wow. I didn't realize there was another name like Naomi in the Bible, and I definitely was surprised to learn that Tubal-Cain had a sister. Back to Naomi. For now, we want to remember that Naomi started her journey with a name that meant something good or pleasant, and that is going to change. Naomi is a complex character in the book of Ruth. We will see many seasons of her identity as a woman throughout the book of Ruth. She is the wife of Elimelech, mother of Mahlon and Chilion, mother-in-law of Orpah and Ruth, grandmother of Obed. As you can see, she is one of the main characters in the book of Ruth, and she is found throughout the entire book of Ruth, unlike Elimelech, her husband. It makes me think what a blessing it is to have God unfold for us different identities through different seasons of our lives. And the most wonderful thing of all is that God is there with us in each new stage and each new phase of our lives. A note on women in the Bible, and Naomi is a very good example of this. We need to be aware that the Bible, as an ancient religious text, gives women a more prominent voice and a bigger role than other ancient religious texts. Research has shown this. In this book of the Bible, named for women, women are the main drivers of the story and an important part of God's overall plan for redemption of his people. The main male character in this story is, in a way, judged, or his actions are looked at in light of how he treats the main women in this story. We will learn from Naomi's emotions, her words, and actions something about our identity and how our emotions, words, and actions may not always be very different than hers. And we will learn about the identity of the God that we serve, who loves us so much through every situation and will always provide for us. Aroma application. In her most obvious identity, Naomi is a wife and mother who has to leave her birthplace and community because of a famine. If you were Naomi, how might you have felt the night before you had to leave and as you left your home and your people? What might your attitude have been, number 2, towards your husband and towards God? And number 3, have you ever faced a situation like Naomi's? If so, can you see God's hand in it and his goodness through it? His 2 sons, Division 3. The 2 sons are named, and the family identity based on the place they are from is given in greater detail than we saw in Ruth chapter 1, verse 1. The only identity given to the sons here is just that. They are sons. We do know that they are referred to as one unit throughout the book of Ruth, as we see here. As such, they are obedient to their father and travel with him away from the famine to find food. As I studied this, I was reminded of the sonship that I have with God my Father because of the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross for my sin. Being a son in ancient Israel had much significance as an identity of honor and favor, as well as responsibility. There is some speculation about the sons' names, but scholars don't agree on what the meanings are, but they do agree on one thing. They really don't definitively know the meaning of the name. Unfortunately, some biblical words and names are lost to us because languages can change over time. While we may not know the meaning of their names, they had names, and God chose to record them in His Word. So we read about them today by their specific name, thousands of years later. Their legacy is not entirely forgotten just because we don't know the meaning of their names. Both person names and place names were important identifiers in ancient Israel. They gave the Israelites a sense of purpose and pride. While human given names are sometimes important in the Bible, the most important, always meaningful names are the names of our God and the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. But who are the Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah? That was a name that I was not familiar with when I started working on my Ruth Bible study. Ephrathah was the most ancient name for Bethlehem, and people from there were sometimes called Ephrathites in other parts of the Bible. The term seems redundant as those from Bethlehem would have also been called Ephrathites, and so scholars aren't entirely sure why the word is basically being used here. Possibly they are used together to emphasize with specificity that these are real people and a real historical account. Perhaps, though, there is another meaning. Bethlehem, as we learned in our last video, means house of bread. It signifies a place where grain is plentiful to make bread for people to eat. Unfortunately, we learned it was not living up to its name at this time of famine. Interestingly, Ephrathah means fruitfulness. Fruitfulness. So both words, Bethlehem and Ephrathah, imply a place of abundant provision. And unfortunately, that just wasn't happening at this time. But nonetheless, this concept of Bethlehem, Ephrathah being almost doubly fruitful, is something for us to keep in mind as we see that this family actually has to leave this land to go somewhere else because of a famine. And likely that is because of what we learned about in the book of Judges, that was a judgment of God against Israel. The two names, Bethlehem and Ephrathah, ultimately live up to their meanings in the person of Jesus Christ. He was a fruit of Bethlehem. He provides us with endless streams of living water and is the bread of life. In John 6:35, Jesus declares, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. That means no more famine. The biblical connection for Bethlehem Ephratah is found in Micah 5:2, where Micah the prophet says, But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days. And we know that that prophecy is about Jesus Christ. Aroma application. Number 1. Have you experienced a place that disappointed you? How did you resolve that? Number 2. What might it be like to face a famine with children? What would be most important to you in that situation? The final division in our verse arrange is the destination. What is the identity of Moab? First, what is the meaning of this word continued there? There was another word we talked about in the previous video, Ruth 1:1, about sojourning in the land, which meant staying temporarily. Does this word mean the same thing? I wondered that, and so I looked it up. And the answer is no. It is a different word entirely, and it's a rather simple word. Again, referring to the pulpit commentary, it says, the meaning of continued there in the original Hebrew is simply and were there. In other words, they arrived in Moab. Place identities in the Bible are important, and that is why I do like to teach a little bit of geography as I am going through my Bible studies. And so I taught about Moab, its origins, culture, and often complicated relationship to Israel in my video on Ruth 1:1 in great detail. So please go back and review that. I will present just a brief summary in today's lesson. Moab was one of the idol worshiping nations surrounding the tribal allotments of the land of Israel. It is located east of the Dead Sea. At many times in history, Moab was an enemy of Israel, but not always. God declared in Deuteronomy 23, verse 3, that Moabites shall not enter the assembly of the Lord, although there was no specific law against marrying Moabites, as there were about marrying other enemies of Israel. So Moab, despite its history as an enemy of Israel at times and its spiritual condition as a land of idol worship, was also a land with fertile, fruitful plains. It was far away from the region of famine in Israel, actually all the way across the Dead Sea in the region called the Transjordan. So it was a likely place to go in a time of famine. Aroma application. Number 1, has God ever led you into an unfriendly situation? Was that difficult for you? Number 2, in what ways is living in what many call a post-Christian world today in 2024 similar to living in Moab? Number 3, can you trust God to bring all things together for good even in trials of famine or lack? Look up Romans 8:28, write it down, and commit it to memory. What are the main points for you to take away from today's Bible study? Number 1, we do not know and should not assume that Elimelech was wrong to leave Bethlehem and go to Moab. Number 2, there is only one Naomi in the Bible. Number 3, Paleo-Hebrew is the most ancient form of Hebrew and can be helpful in interpreting archaeological artifacts and understanding the Hebrew of the Bible. Ephrathites refer to the people from Ephrath, likely the most ancient name for Bethlehem, where Elimelech and his family were from. Tubal-Cain is a descendant of Cain and the world's first metal worker. His sister was Naamah, a name closely related to the name Naomi, a main character in the book of Ruth. Today's lesson is finished, but keep studying and share what you learn. Please come back for the next lesson. And remember, be the aroma of Christ everywhere you go. Thank you for watching Aroma Mom Bible Study, spreading the aroma of the knowledge of Christ in every place. 2 Corinthians 2:14. Like and subscribe for more Bible study like this one.